Salut! Aujourd'hui, on va revoir la leçon 22. Today we're going to go over lesson 22. This lesson covers the use of the passé-composé with reflexive verbs, the difference between il y a and pendant with the passé-composé, as well as the verb faire with an infinitive and the verb conduire. If you'd like to follow along, please download the class notes below. Okay, first, as we saw last week, the passé-composé of reflexive verbs will use the auxiliary être conjugated in the present. Let's put that up on the screen. Now, as you remember, reflexive verbs use a reflexive pronoun that matches the subject of the sentence. Let's put those on the screen too. Now, what's going to happen is pretty simple since you already know about reflexive verbs and the passé-composé. I'm going to show you how to remember the order of the words, meaning where does the reflexive pronoun and the auxiliary, the past participle and the negation go using examples. First, let's use the reflexive verb se laver, which means to wash oneself. And let's conjugate it in the passé-composé. Because it's a reflexive verb, it will use the auxiliary être in the present. And we already have that one on the screen. All we need to do is add the reflexive pronoun in the right spot, and then add the past participle of laver, which is laver. What you need to remember is that the reflexive pronoun is part of the conjugation. So if it's part of the conjugation, and the conjugated verb is être, they come as a unit, and they won't be split. Alright, let's mix up what we have on the board, and conjugate the verb in the passé-composé. Repeat after me. Je me suis lavé. Tu t'es lavé. Il s'est lavé. Nous nous sommes lavés. Vous vous êtes lavés. Ils se sont lavés. At first glance, you can see I added some dotted E's in there. Remember, when we use the auxiliary être, the past participle will agree in gender and number with the subject. So that's why when I say tu t'es lavé, there is the possibility of having only one E if I speak to a man, but two E's if I speak to a woman. Also, I put in bold the reflexive pronoun and the auxiliary so you can clearly see that they come as a unit. Alright, now what happens when we add the negation parts? We will use ne and pas for our example. Well, we saw that the negation parts go around the conjugated verb. But I just said that the reflexive pronoun is part of the conjugated unit. So the correct way is to put the negation parts around the reflexive pronoun and auxiliary as a group. Let's conjugate our verb using the negative ne pas here. Repeat after me. Je ne me suis pas lavé. Tu ne t'es pas lavé. Il ne s'est pas lavé. Nous ne nous sommes pas lavés. Vous ne vous êtes pas lavés. Ils ne se sont pas lavés. Alright, I hope this is making it clear. But also, what happens when we want to use the passé-composé of a reflexive verb in a question? Well, again, think of the reflexive pronoun and the auxiliary as a group. So don't split it. And then, remember that we invert the conjugated verb with the subject. This means we will invert the reflexive pronoun and auxiliary as a group with the subject. Alright, let's look at it. I'm only going to read the affirmative form here, but I'm also putting the negative form in between parentheses, just in case you want to see it written. So our conjugation in the interrogative form will be, repeat after me, me suis-je lavé? T'es-tu lavé? S'est-il lavé? Nous sommes-nous lavés? Vous êtes-vous lavés? Se sont-ils lavés? Alright, Now we need to see a difference between il y a and pendant with the passé composé. This one, I'll give it to you in a way that you'll never forget. If you have a passé composé with an amount of time, just use il y a to mean ago, and pendant to mean for. Here is an example of both so you can see it in action. Nous nous sommes lavés il y a 1 heure. It means we washed ourselves an hour ago. But nous nous sommes lavés pendant 1 heure means we washed ourselves for an hour. There are more examples in the notes, so I won't dwell too much on this point. All you have to do is remember that with the passé composé and time, you use either il y a or pendant. That's it. Now let's go over the verb conduire, which means to drive. First, keep in mind that the verb se conduire as a reflexive verb also exists, but it means to behave. Secondly, the conjugated key for the verb conduire also works for construire, which means to build, and produire, which means to produce. So to conjugate these verbs, just remove their ending re and add instead the endings in color that we're about to see for conduire. Alright, the verb conduire in the present is conjugated as follows. Repeat after me. Je conduis, tu conduis, il conduit, nous conduisons, vous conduisez, ils conduisent. Okay, now let's go over the passé composé of the verb conduire. The verb conduire uses the auxiliary avoir like most verbs, and its past participle is conduit with a T. This means that the verb conduire in the passé composé is conjugated as follows. Repeat after me. J'ai conduit, tu as conduit, il a conduit, nous avons conduit, vous avez conduit, ils ont conduit. Alright, one final point, and it's about the verb faire. The verb faire, which we have seen many times now, can be used as a causative, meaning that you cause someone else to do something. This is done by using the verb faire normally and adding any infinitive after. In English, you would say, for example, I make him do the dishes. But it's a bit harsh in English. It's like you're forcing someone to do something. In French, we use the causative way more often. It would sound more like I get the dishes done in our previous example. And it doesn't have to be a chore. For example, you can say Je fais réparer ma voiture. This literally means I make my car checked. What you mean in this sentence is that you're having your car checked. You're not forcing anyone to do it. And the person who does it isn't really relevant in that sentence. Let me give you a few more examples to make it clearer. Ils font manger les enfants means they're making the children eat. But what it actually means is they're feeding the kids. L'enseignant fait faire leurs devoirs aux élèves. This means the teacher is having the students do their homework. Okay, talking about homework, I hope you keep on doing yours. Every week, they're at the end of the notes, and the following week, you have the correction on the first page of the notes. Anyway, this was the end of the lesson. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. Also, maybe you can use this lesson and tell me for how long or how long ago you did something. For example, I watched the video for an hour. And also, if you happen to see the subscribe button below, it's right next to the thumb up. And if it's still red, it means you're not subscribed. So consider clicking it. In the meantime, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you on the next one. Au revoir.